So let's run with this. The way you tell a story shapes what the story is. And let's also run with this idea that authors are inherently going to put their spin on something by taking a look at the Classic of the Odes selection that you had dealing with King Wen. So anytime somebody composes something, they do it for a reason, and they do it with a particular audience in mind. If you're texting your friends, if you're writing a letter to grandma, if you're emailing your professor, you've got a particular audience and a particular purpose. We don't know who wrote the ode about King Wen. We don't know that because it's something that was an oral tradition for 400 years before it was eventually written down. But what we might do is think about who that person was and why who they are would shape what they say, and also why this might be something that is then passed on from generation to generation and becomes so important to the Zhou dynasty. So I'm going to read through some of this stuff, and I want us to think about how we might answer those questions, thinking about context clues here. King Wen is on high. Oh, he shines in heaven. Zhou is an old people, but its mandate is new. The leaders of the Zhou became illustrious. Was not God's mandate timely given? King Wen ascends and descends on the left and right hand of God. August, awesome, was King Wen, continuously bright and reverent. Great indeed was the mandate of heaven. Shang's grandsons and sons, the people that, me inserting myself here, the people that the Zhou conquered. Shang's grandsons and sons, was not their number 100,000? But the high God gave his mandate and they bowed down to the Zhou. Okay, so using that, we might think, okay, this guy is talking very positively about the Zhou. He's probably a member of the Zhou society as well. He's probably not a Shang who's writing really awesome stuff about the people who defeated them. We might think a little bit more. If somebody's composing something like this, they probably aren't a farmer. They're probably a scholar, right? Somebody who's well educated. Somebody who needs to seek an occupation other than what they're doing with their hands. They need to sell their intellect, and for that they need somebody who's going to pay them to do that. He talks a lot of really awesome things about King Wen. So it seems like Wen's his audience. Even though he's talking to everyone, he's got a very particular audience here, and he seems to really flatter him. So this to me is kind of like my conversation with my parents, right? Where if you're hoping for, I don't know, your curfew to extend, you might say, hey mom, did you get a new haircut? Looks really good. Mom, I really like what you've been doing in terms of whatever mom does. Baking cookies lately. They've been awesome. You lost some weight, right? All these things are going on here as well. King Wen is awesome. He's there. He's there because God loves him, because he should have been there. Even though the Zhou faced thousands and thousands of well-trained Shang warriors, they were successful, right? All of this tells us that this is a suck-up to King Wen. And what he's doing here is presenting a very positive view of him and his rule. So maybe the audience is Wen, maybe it's one of his successors who would have had Wen as their father or grandfather. But if we think about that, then this guy's purpose might be to get a job, right? To flatter this guy, to become a court patron. And he's going to necessarily be leaving a lot of things out. So what is this mandate of heaven, and what implications does it have? Well, let's look at that last excerpt, the one that starts with 7. Mandate's not easy to keep. May it not end in your persons. Display and make bright your good fame, and consider what yin is received from heaven. The doings of high heaven have no small sound, no smell. Make King Wen your pattern, and all the states will trust in you. Make King Wen your pattern. Be like Wen. It's kind of a slogan here. So this mandate of heaven, it's a complex and simple idea. And the underlying idea is that if you're in power, you're meant to be there. Right? It's kind of a very fatalistic view. If somebody's ruling, it's because they have brought peace and order, and this idea of Tao, that the entire society is harmonious, is reflected in the king. So if the king's there, he's meant to be there because the gods want him to be there. So that means that the person there is divinely appointed. What implication does that have, though, for kings themselves? What happens if they don't live a good life? What happens if they create disorder? Or even worse, what happens if through no cause of their own, something like an earthquake destroys their city? That suggests the world is out of order, and it might justify rebellion. Keep in mind here, they're talking about the Zhou, who overthrew people beforehand. So you might also read this as, hey, let's find ways to figure out what these rulers are doing poorly. Let's exploit that. And then when we overthrow them, we can say, we have received the mandate of heaven. So it's a very circular argument that justifies the people who are in control and allows people to try and seek it. Let's think about these ideas a little bit more in two, at least, of the next primary sources and consider how we might answer the question we've got along with the ideas of the mandate of heaven.